Good evening, everyone. We're going to just give a few more minutes or moments for more of this evening's participants to join us. We'll get started shortly. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us this evening for this town hall meeting for the Geary 19th Avenue Subway and Regional Connection Study. We're very glad you're here. We would like to start by letting everyone know that we have Spanish and Cantonese language support this evening, and we have our two wonderful interpreters joining us. First, welcome to Martín, who will be translating into Spanish. Martín?
Thank you very much. Muy buenas tardes a mis hispanoparlantes. Aquí su intérprete para esta velada. Voy a estar en simultáneo toda la noche. Van a poder acceder a mi servicio a través del icono con forma de planeta que se va a habilitar en breve. Una vez que hacen clic allí, seleccionan español y me pueden escuchar a mí. Muchísimas gracias y que lo disfruten. Thank you very much.
嗨，大家好咧，歡迎大家嚟參加今日嘅呢個就係第19大道地鐵仲有區域呢個研究嘅呢個會議啦。我哋好歡迎你哋嚟到呢個會議上面啦。今日係有呢個西班牙語仲有粵語嘅呢個翻譯嘅。如果你哋想用翻譯用廣東話聽今日嘅會議嘅話，你可以揀就係陣間睇到一個地球儀嗰度揀 Chinese 就可以睇到可以聽到我哋廣東話嘅翻譯噶啦。Thank you。
Thank you so much, Martín and Echo. Good evening again, everyone. My name is Jesse Kaler, and I serve as the Rail Program Manager here at the San Francisco County Transportation Authority. The Transportation Authority is leading this study in partnership with the SFMTA and the San Francisco Planning Department. We'll do some more introductions shortly, and I will be facilitating this evening's discussion. First, though, I'd like to ask my colleague Brittany Chan to just cover a couple of housekeeping items right at the top.
So before we dive in, just a few quick notes. We're recording tonight's meeting, so anyone who couldn't make it can watch it later. And we'll be posting the recording on our project webpage at sfcta.org/Geary19th. And if you have any questions during the presentation, go ahead and submit them using the Q&A button in Zoom. That helps us keep track and get to as many questions as we can. And if you don't see it right away in your toolbar, try clicking the More icon at the bottom of your screen.
Thanks, Brittany. All right, well, this evening we are very pleased to be joined by the chair of the Transportation Authority Board, Supervisor Mirna Melgar. Chair Melgar has served as our board sponsor for this study, and we are very grateful for her leadership in championing this effort and for her guidance throughout the process. Chair Melgar, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Thank you, everyone, for wanting to spend some of your evening with us, learning more about transportation and the plans and work of the Transportation Authority. I'm Mirna Melgar. I'm the supervisor for District 7. I'm the chair of the Transportation Authority and also chair the Land Use and Transportation Committee for the board. I say that because transportation is very important right now for the West Side. We are growing. We are paving the way for a new generation. Our children will thank us for the work that we're doing here tonight. We are envisioning how we can have the infrastructure to have more connected neighborhoods on the West Side, particularly the Richmond to Stonestown Mall, and all of the things in between. So I am grateful for the wonderful work that the Transportation Authority staff has done with this study, and also to my colleagues, Supervisor Wong in District 4 and Supervisor Connie Chan in District 1, who have both weighed in and been involved in the work that we are going to present to you tonight. So again, thank you for spending some of your time with us. Please stay tuned to this work. It's very important. And I will turn it back over to you, Jesse. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair Melgar, for that introduction and for being with us this evening. With that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to my colleague, Andrew Heidel, who has served as the project manager for this study. Andrew?
Thanks so much, Jesse, and I'll echo our Chair Melgar's comments to thank everyone again for spending time with us on this Thursday evening. It's great to see so much interest once again for the work. So as Jesse mentioned, I'm Andrew Heidel, a principal planner with the San Francisco County Transportation Authority. And I also, you've already heard from Jesse and Brittany, so I won't reintroduce them. It's been over a year since we last had an update on this work, and while I recognize some of the names from those past events, for the sake of those who are new, I'll start off tonight with a quick refresher on the history and background of this study and project. Then I'm excited to be able to share some findings from this phase of work as we look to finalize this phase and prepare for our final report. As Brittany mentioned, we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So please do feel free to drop those questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to those at the end in a discussion that Jesse will help us facilitate. So getting into it, let's start with a quick refresher on the genesis of this effort and what we've been up to. As you likely know, the concept of a subway under Geary Boulevard has been discussed for well over 70 years, dating back to at least the original planning studies for the BART system in the 1950s. Since then, a number of studies and plans have consistently identified the need for a better connection between the West Side and downtown San Francisco, including San Francisco's Four Corridors plan in the upper right of this slide here, the city's 2016 subway vision, and through various citywide planning processes, including the Transportation Authority's San Francisco Transportation Plan, our countywide guiding document. Throughout these studies, the needs of riders have been consistent: faster trips, less crowding, better connections, and maintaining a state of good repair. But these years of work have also evolved our understanding of solutions. In this case, aligning a Geary subway with a new Transbay rail crossing in the east and along 19th Avenue towards a connection in San Mateo County in the south would allow the project to act as a broader part of the regional East Bay to Peninsula connection, while also serving parts of San Francisco that today are not well connected to the regional transit network. These needs and benefits were highlighted most recently in the 2024 update to the California statewide rail plan, which identifies connecting Western San Francisco into the statewide rail network as a long-term priority. The current phase of work has picked up where the 2021 transit strategy left off, and has worked to refine the case for moving a Geary 19th Avenue subway forward, while also developing a roadmap for the next steps. Of course, planning for these kinds of generational investments is a multi-year, multi-step process. To identify a preferred alternative, that is the actual routing of the subway, where station locations might go, and what kinds of trains or technology would actually run in the subway, much more technical work and community conversations will need to happen. But that's why we're starting now with our current initial phase, where we've reconfirmed the case for the project and are working to lay out the roadmap through future phases and steps, with a relatively modest investment of time and resources up front that will help us advise the public and elected officials about how and when to proceed as future phases grow in size and cost, as shown on the illustration here. Our goal at the conclusion of each of these phases in each of these boxes is to know enough to feel comfortable committing the resources needed to advance into the subsequent phase. So just to be clear at the top, we're not looking to draw those lines on a map or make decisions about what a preferred alternative might be in this phase, nor have we done the technical work or outreach that would allow us to do this. This will come in the following defining the project alternatives analysis phase, as well as prioritizing the investment program across the city. But we want to recognize that it's important to prompt conversations around the ingredients that would lead us to success now. Before we go further, I also want to recognize a critical issue that you may have heard about facing us today, which is the transit fiscal cliff. This is an issue you'll likely hear more about over the coming year, as San Francisco and the region weigh how to bolster transit funding to address operating shortfalls. But as we just discussed, the planning, design, and funding of large projects like a new subway takes significant time. And we see advancing this work now as important to lay the groundwork for confirming our capital priorities and securing local, regional, state, and federal funding that would be required in the future to deliver this project. If we wait until our existing system is bursting at the seams, we'll already be decades behind. So doing this work now is a long-term commitment to San Francisco's transit-first future. And despite the disruptions brought on by the pandemic and the changes we've seen during and since that time with respect to San Francisco's population, travel patterns, and the way we live, San Francisco remains an attractive place to live and work. The assumptions about the future underpinning our planning work are aligned with regional projections, which show that San Francisco is expected to grow with 29% more jobs and 50% more residents than today by 2050. We are just starting to understand from a data perspective what post-pandemic travel patterns look like. So the assumptions you hear and the results you hear about tonight will need to be revisited and revised over time in these future phases as changes to that understanding occur. We've also incorporated into our work the great feedback and questions we heard during our online town halls and community group meetings throughout 2024 and 2025, along with our online survey. So people were very interested in our online survey with over 2,400 responses. The feedback there mirrored what we heard most frequently in person as well. People are excited about the project and understand its need. People's questions and concerns focused around costs and schedule. How can we find a way to move this work forward more quickly, and about how any potential construction might affect streets and neighborhoods, including residents and businesses. In our first round of outreach, we also shared our high-level framework for thinking about the benefits of building a Geary 19th Avenue subway. So as our last bit of review, I'll touch on these at a high level because you'll see these themes come through in how we share the results. First one, how does our experience improve for travelers? Will this investment help make transit and getting around easier, faster, and more attractive for more trips? Second, understanding the growth that is planned for San Francisco. How can the project help both serve current needs and those that could arise from the growth? Can we ensure that benefits to existing residents, including those who have been historically disadvantaged or excluded, are shared equitably? And third, can the project make contributions to larger local, regional, and statewide goals that might be beyond the scope of any one action, but require everything we do to move in the right direction, thinking about environmental and air quality goals in particular? So with that framework in mind, we set out to identify what the key decisions the planners, engineers, community members, and elected officials would likely need to make as the project advances. And as importantly, what doors might be opened or closed by making those decisions. So again, as a reminder, these are not decisions that will or can be made in this phase, but what we are doing here is identifying an initial set of areas where there are clear options and asking for agreement that these are indeed those key decisions so we can prepare the analysis and engagement that will help us move forward. So the study is proposing a set of important high-level decisions that we believe have significant implications for later planning and design work. In many cases, these decisions are interrelated. So if a project goes down a certain path on routing, for example, it might impact the technologies that are on the table, which may impact the ability to connect service directly, what we call through running, to the East Bay and San Mateo County. So please don't think of these as an ordered checklist. Each piece will impact the others on the screen and will require all of us to weigh priorities among them. But running through what's on the screen here, and then I'll touch on each in more detail on the coming slides. How does the project connect at a regional network? Do trains through run? What benefits, implications, or drawbacks does through running have versus a passenger connection, where one might be asked to get off a train, walk or roll across the platform, and get on another? What neighborhoods or areas within San Francisco should be served directly? I've identified a couple of discrete options in downtown San Francisco, and more of a universe with many options on how to transition from Geary to 19th. What train technologies are best suited for a project like this? This influences performance and station spacing, but also, again, can be directly related to the regional connectivity question. So let's start with regional connectivity. Regional connectivity is a mix of policy, technology, and coordinated decision-making. We consider maximizing regional connectivity to the extent possible to be mutually beneficial both to this project and to the regional system as a whole. We understand that there are ways to achieve that beyond through running trains, But as we'll see in the next section, through running does have real anticipated benefits over a passenger transfer. Pointing again to the state rail plan here, that document echoed this understanding, noting a desire to bring Western San Francisco within the reach of the statewide rail network, either directly or via a high-quality connection. As we sort through this question, we'll also need to keep other agency and operator plans in mind. Link 21 is working on a Transbay rail crossing. Caltrain has improved service as a result of electrification. How do we integrate with those systems as well? To illustrate that point, we have two potential downtown routing options paired with two of the technology concepts explored in Link 21, the project exploring the new Transbay rail crossing. The Link 21 BART technology concept, coming up 3rd Street on the left, could pair with a downtown San Francisco routing directly under Geary. Or the Link 21 standard gauge technology concept on the right, the somewhat significant modification or expansion to the Salesforce Transit Center through run trains to Geary, but via Civic Center rather than Union Square. Alternatively, a BART crossing that is under Howard could also use this routing. Connecting the Geary and 19th Avenue segments has more options and less certainty. With a more eastern alignment, potentially turning at or near Masonic, the subway could directly serve areas with existing and established residential density, as well as important regional destinations like the University of San Francisco and UCSF Parnassus campus. These areas, however, are also already served by a higher density of transit than points more further west and enjoy relatively short travel times to and from downtown today. By continuing further west under Geary Boulevard before making a turn to the south, the subway would have the opportunity to not only serve important regional destinations like Japantown, Kaiser Hospital, and USF, again, as all alignments would, but it would also directly serve areas not well linked to regional transit today, shortening journey times to and from the Richmond. A number of options in the middle would help support adopted plans and policies by serving housing growth areas, still enabling faster regional connections to places like Golden Gate Park, the Inner Sunset, and again, UCSF, all of which draw regional visitors and local trips. This is also where potential phasing options for the project could be developed further. So could, for example, rather than building all 10 miles of the project at once, segments that have defined benefit proceed, anticipating future phases. For the southern project terminus, we considered options to create either a passenger connection or a through running opportunity, depending on technology, as far north as the Daly City BART station and as far south as the Colma BART station. For the purposes of our analysis, we assume Daly City as the tie-in, but understand that to do that, physical improvements may need to eventually stretch further south. We also, and closely related to that question is the technology for the subway. So for the purposes of this project, we're considering modes that can provide frequent, high-capacity metro-like service that's reflective of the demand in the corridor. The study does prioritize modes that are interoperable with and could through run with the regional network. So that's BART technology, broad gauge heavy metro, and regional rail, standard gauge electrified. Not quite what you might see on the Caltrain corridor today, but something that could interoperate on a railroad like that. We're also considering other potential technologies, Uni Metro, light rail transit, or automated light rail, which is used in places like Vancouver. We also want to consider that depending on technology, we could have an impact on where maintenance facility and storage for vehicles might need to be sited. What does this all mean with respect to what performance results and improvements in the three areas we talked about earlier: traveler experience, supporting San Francisco's growth, and larger public policy goals? We tested those key questions while identifying and exploring other considerations to understand what the subway project's range of benefits might be. We're happy to see improvements across all three of those key areas, and I'll get into more detail about that in a moment. We also identified what we'll recommend as other critical building blocks to advance as part of or in parallel to additional project planning, speaking specifically about funding, land use, how connecting transit might work, and what other supportive policies can help maximize the benefits we'll see and perhaps help pay for the project. So on the next few slides, I'll share what we think are the key takeaways for planners, community members, and decision makers going forward. First, we believe the overall case for the project is and remains promising and has the potential to be an integral part of the regional and statewide rail system. We'll recommend that San Francisco should continue to lead and advance planning for the project to prepare for the future, with the knowledge that maximizing project benefits also creates the opportunity to create value in time savings for travelers, the accessibility and value of land, and economic activity and productivity, and that capturing and leveraging that value will be critical in underpinning the funding for the project, given its potential high capital cost. Talk more about that in a moment. We also note that there are trade-offs. It's important to deliver benefits to existing residents and businesses while mitigating potential effects such as displacement. Next, we've confirmed that regional connectivity is important towards delivering the most amount of benefits to travelers and communities. The project does perform well as a San Francisco-only subway, but performs much better when it is integrated with the region's rail network. These benefits increase not only for San Franciscans, but travelers across the region. Put some numbers to that. So depending on the route, a San Francisco-only subway could see between 160 and 180,000 trips per day, matching today's system-wide BART daily ridership as a point of reference. That could increase to over 300,000 trips per day with regional connectivity. So on an individual level also, some trips to, from, and through San Francisco could get shorter by as much as 20 minutes with those regional connections as well. Our same analysis showed that multiple design options can deliver benefits. So as the project advances, clear input from community members will be important to balance with technical considerations to select routes and station locations. Project design decisions have the potential to drive the ultimate cost of the project. We currently estimate the full cost of the project to be between $20 and $30 billion. In future phases, we will also need to consider what project phasing might be. For example, if there is an initial segment that can deliver some benefits at a smaller cost, while still anticipating the full build-out of the project. To give some specific examples of that, there's only small differences in system performance between the different downtown options, or those that connect between Geary and 19th Avenue, so performed similarly in overall ridership estimates. But who specifically benefits or who specifically rides could vary depending on what areas are served. Speaking to our passenger experience, regional and statewide climate and equity goals, we found that the project moves the needle in the right direction in each of these versus a future where this project isn't built. And the good news is that our analysis shows that the people who benefit the most are those who live in communities that have been historically disadvantaged or excluded from this type of project and project planning work. To give some examples for travel time savings, this project increases the average, let me explain this one. The project increases the number of jobs accessible by the average San Francisco household within a 45-minute transit trip by about 45,000 jobs. 6% on a San Francisco only alignment, or 57,000, that's 9% with regional connections. To highlight some of those equity benefits, residents of San Francisco's equity priority communities gain even more, with 57 to 72,000 additional jobs. The project also shows reduced vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions, which is a 4% reduction citywide. That's 400,000 miles per day. Just as some context, it's very rare that we see a single project that can achieve even 1%. So this is good performance here. Some other stats that equity priority community residents represent about 20% of the boardings of the project, but experience 50% of the travel time savings, and also represent about 50% of the net new transit boardings. So that is folks that previously did not use transit, but do today. As we think about what it will take to deliver the project, it became evident that the benefits will need to be regionally significant to attract the full package of local, regional, state, and federal funds that will be required. That includes decisions about the project itself. We already touched on the integration with the regional network a few times, but also supportive policies adopted by the city and neighborhoods, like land use, parking, and transit decisions. As we see, major transit investments have to secure support not only from local sponsors, but from funders at the regional, state, and federal level. We do expect the project to perform well under traditional federal grant criteria. That's the FTA Capital Investment Program. Criteria for that, project justification around improvements to mobility, environmental, congestion benefits, land use, and economic development. But to position this project for success, our local strategy typically comes down to the local financial commitment. The best way for a project to be competitive is to demonstrate how we can afford it by providing a local match. Local funding is a critical part of this process, and why leveraging those sources will be important. But we do need to think creatively about new places to look for funding, as existing sources are not enough to fund a project of this size. We've talked earlier about the project delivering value in terms of travel time, land value, and economic activity. Are there ways to recoup a meaningful portion of that value to contribute to the cost of the project? These and other sources are likely to be competitive, meaning that we should look to make decisions that maximize performance and minimize cost. As I mentioned, drawing a connection or a nexus between the value that the project would deliver and potential sources of funding will be important. Some examples of potential methods are on the screen here. For example, are there ways to create a win-win by reducing vehicle congestion and funding transit improvements through a road user charge, as has shown success in New York and Chicago? Can we explore methods like a benefit district or joint development to bring some of the expected increase in land value back to the project? I do want to be clear that none of these ideas are certain at this point, and it's very early, but it's important to further develop them as the project moves along as well, and to understand where certain techniques can play a role in making the subway a reality. And finally, moving the project forward will require a robust mix of community input alongside technical development, planning, and engineering to inform our project choices. Continued engagement and support from people like yourselves and your neighbors and friends, and important active outreach to other people who may not be able to attend events like these will be critical. So where do we go from here? For this study, we anticipate March 2026 outreach and a presentation of the final report to the Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee and Transportation Authority Board this spring. In some additional context, beyond the study itself, the project will need to be evaluated and prioritized in our local and regional processes. The San Francisco Transportation Plan is the 30-year investment plan for our transportation revenues. It includes all operators and networks serving San Francisco, one of the Transportation Authority's core responsibilities as San Francisco's designated county congestion management agency. Projects seeking federal funds or approval need to be in Plan Bay area, which is fed by the San Francisco Transportation Plan. Our opportunity to provide input to MTC for this purpose, each of which are adopted every 4 years. The bullets on the lower left are some examples of major transit capital projects that have been previously given priority in MTC's regional transit expansion policy and were successfully delivered. So that's the 3rd Street Light Rail and Central Subway, Caltrain electrification, and still moving forward, the portal in downtown San Francisco. As I mentioned, we expect the project to perform well in these processes, and the next full-scale San Francisco Transportation Plan can help prioritize this and other major capital recommendations, like a central subway extension, which is also in the conversation. There's currently a minor mid-cycle update underway to the SFTP, San Francisco Transportation Plan, called SFTP Plus. This minor update will support the development of the transit strategy priorities, and later this year, our board will adopt the SFTP Plus, and MTC will launch the next full update of Plan Bay area. Together with MTC, that's when we recommend further prioritization after the current planning and project development efforts make more progress. As we work towards these milestones, we encourage interested folks to participate in the SFTP process, which will launch a round of outreach on our investment and vision scenarios later this spring. So please visit sfcta.org/SFTP to learn more. That concludes my presentation. Looking forward to the Q&A.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks everyone for your attention during Andy's presentation, as well as for all the really good questions that have started to come in via the QA, and I'll also try to pick up some of the comments from the chat. So, Andy, there were several questions that pertained to technology or the type of train or rail that would be on the project, and they're kind of in 2 or 3 flavors. Perhaps first you could speak to the relationship or elaborate a bit on your remarks about the relationship of that set of options for this project to the Link 21 project, the second rail crossing of the bay?
Sure. So Link 21 is a project led jointly by BART and Capital Corridor that is considering the development of a new Transbay rail crossing between Oakland and San Francisco. The set of technologies that Link 21 evaluated were standard gauge regional rail and BART, as we discussed here, and that's why we included each of those in our study. We also included some technologies that could be delivered just locally in San Francisco that aren't dependent on that Transbay connection in downtown San Francisco. So that's the Muni Light Rail and the automated light rail systems.
And thanks, Andy. You covered both of my questions in one go. Not my questions, the questions I'm trying to synthesize here. The other nuance perhaps you could speak to is about the fact that the Link 21 project made a recommendation last year that the second crossing be what we call regional rail or a standard gauge, which is narrower than the wider BART gauge. What's the bearing of that on our study and the range of options that we've looked at?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that the BART and Capital Corridor boards did take that recommendation and make that decision for Link 21. Because we're still in such early phase planning work, we want to make sure that we have a perspective on what works best for San Francisco. And as Link 21's projects develop, both of these projects clearly have long time horizons, and we want to be able to provide input to that from San Francisco's perspective on as we further analyze what a connection to Western and Southwestern San Francisco looks like, we feel like the benefits could be mutual to have compatible technology in there. So want to recognize that decision by Link 21 and also recognize that we in San Francisco have a little bit more work to do to make sure that we understand that that's also right for us.
Thanks, Andy. While I sift through the next couple of questions, do you mind turning back to the map? That's the uh, overall view of the alignment. And as a reminder, it would be helpful if folks do have questions, if you are able to put them in the Q&A, or if you can't find that into the chat, we will get to them. Andy, there's a question about the relationship of this project to the Geary and Fillmore intersection, which has an underpass. And I know actually the Transportation Authority is leading some other planning with respect to that location. Could you speak to the relationship to that work and the potential longer term impacts of this project?
Sure. So I think we spent some time talking this evening about where there were potential options that we saw in the corridor. There's also some core segments that are common to every potential option. So that's sort of the core Geary alignment, particularly with that anchor at Geary and Fillmore, and then the north-south alignment on 19th Avenue. So speaking specifically to the Geary and Fillmore intersection, Jesse, as you recognize, there is a study underway to explore stitching back together the urban fabric there that was severed by the underpass that is currently there. So I think we want to be in close coordination with that project, who is likely on a slightly faster time frame than we are, to make sure that work or decisions that they make in collaboration with the communities don't preclude our ability to site a subway or potential subway station at or near that Geary Fillmore intersection, because that is a common element of most of the all of the options that we evaluated in this phase.
Thanks, Andy. I could take the next one, which we had a question about the initial planning level cost range that was in the presentation of approximately 20 to 30 billion. I'll provide a little elaboration on that. That is a very initial range that is based on unit costs of a range of comparator projects in North America, which reflected different modes. For an urban subway project like this, a very significant portion of the cost is associated with the tunneling and excavation of stations, which to some extent is consistent across different technologies. It is true that certain technologies require shorter or wider or longer or narrower station footprints or alignments that ultimately play into the cost. But at this level of analysis, that is a very broad range that is inclusive of the 4 different modes that we have considered thus far. Andy, there were a few questions about our ridership estimates and their consistency with San Francisco's housing plans, and some concern that already uh, uh, that that there is, a pace at which those will take place. So could you just speak to sort of the longer term nature of these forecasts and how we ensure they're consistent?
Yeah, so the forecasts we use, as I mentioned, are consistent with the regional housing production goals as well as requirements from the state and regional level, and are reflective of the growth adopted in the recently adopted family zoning plan. I do think that it is fair to say that there is some uncertainty about what speed though that growth will actually arrive. So the law requires that San Francisco provide the capacity to create that housing, but leave it up to the market to deliver that housing at the end of the day. We've thought about this investment as a generational investment. To be clear, our model horizon year in here, what we estimated is 2050. But given that that's where are we at now, 25 years plus into the future, it's not likely that that is reflective of the exact condition in 2050. But we're looking at a subway that is going to provide value for 100 years plus. So I think the message of still working on the planning now, understanding, and as I mentioned up top, continuing to revise those assumptions, understanding built-in reflection of how things do progress as the study progresses before we make decisions about funding and constructing the subway is going to be important.
Thanks. There's a few questions that speak to this, as you were saying, the scale of this investment and prioritization, as well as an acknowledgement that there are other transit projects that have been prioritized or identified, I should say, through our long-range planning processes thus far. I could provide a little elaboration on this. The uh, the Connect SF process, which Andy spoke to from a couple of years ago, our long-range transportation strategy that is an input to the countywide plan and the regional process, identified a number of transit expansion projects, including the portal, also known as the downtown rail extension, that is moving toward construction in the next number of years. This project, an extension of the central subway further north, as well as other priorities. And at the level of planning such as this, it is appropriate for planning for multiple projects to go forward. That will help shape future updates to the, if you don't mind switching to the SFTP slide, Andy, and the SFTP PBA slide. That project-specific work will help us get ready for these countywide and regional planning processes. The next update to the San Francisco Transportation Plan in about 4 years will be the stage at which we would expect to see project prioritization happen at the city level. And that prioritization will take into account our local criteria, things like environmental sustainability, equity, economic vitality, safety, livability, as well as consider the affordability and fundability of the project, as Andy spoke to, which is also a key consideration for federal funding. Similarly, at the regional level, there's a prioritization in the long-range transportation plan that MTC produces to develop the region's priorities and make those projects eligible for federal funding. The reality is that these projects take a long time to develop, and the investments would not happen all at once in terms of their delivery. And so to keep us competitive for funding opportunities over time, multiple projects would be advancing through the planning process at the level of individual projects, with prioritization happening ultimately through these countywide and regional planning processes as the project's definition and alternatives analysis is more mature. Andy, there were a few questions about, and sort of speaks to what I was just speaking to, just about time horizon, about the stages of project development and approximate time to move the project forward.
Yeah, let me switch back to that slide. Sorry for the fast scroll here. So thinking about this long-term arc, assuming funding is available, we are still looking at 15 to 20 years from beginning to end. And I will say, as Jesse mentioned, that funding is not all sitting here waiting for us to use today. So I think as we start to think about, we can be more specific about the immediate next phase of the alternatives analysis. So we also do not have full funding for that phase, but we do have some to move forward in our Prop L transportation sales tax. So thinking about what could we potentially do with that in the near term and move forward to an alternative selection in the next few years. As we start to get into the future development phases here, the environmental review, design, and engineering, these are all multi-year efforts in and of themselves as well, which, as Jesse and I have mentioned, represent a significantly larger investment in resources. This is where we would start to get, as Jesse mentioned, past that point of regional prioritization and needing to think about where we as San Francisco and we as a region want to focus our resources on our next large capital investment.
We had a question, just another question, thanks Andy, back to cost estimates about the planning level estimated costs. Those are in current year dollars, so escalated to a potential year of construction, they would be somewhat higher depending on that assumed date. There was also a question about the relationship to work on 19th Avenue that is underway this year to resurface that state highway. I'll acknowledge, and it relates to the timeline on screen, that near-term work to maintain that asset can go forward now, even as we're doing this planning. I'll also note that we anticipate that this project as a subway would be a tunneled excavation beneath street right-of-way, and that any primary service disruption would be at station locations, not along the entirety of the alignment. Andy, there were some somewhat technical questions about, it sort of relates to what I was just saying, but what are the potential issues with running the subway through the park? Could the subway potentially use the Judah tunnel or come out through Carl and Cole? Is the plan for it to be completely underground? So could you just clarify the alignment assumptions a little bit more and the tunneling?
Yeah, so the proposal that was identified in the Connect SF project, so that was the 2021-2022 countywide planning effort, multi-agency planning effort, did identify this alignment as a full subway. It also called for a new alignment, so not reusing any of the existing Uni Metro network or facilities, which would continue to be upgraded in that long-term plan to function more reliably and faster. So not an intention to make the existing Judah line or Judah separation facilities as part of this, but rather to run mostly perpendicular to it in that part of town, connecting to the Judah and the El Taraval on the west side.
There are a few questions about the bay crossings, both the existing BART tube and the potential future Link 21 second crossing in terms of capacity, and whether any of our options could use the existing tube. And the second question being, given if the second crossing were regional rail as recommended by the Link 21 team, are there capacity constraints for that project or our project if we were to tie together?
Yeah, both great questions. So we did, for the first one, work with the Link 21 team to understand what the implications are of potentially branching from the existing Market Street subway for this project. And there are two really significant challenges there that took it out of consideration, both for us and for the Link 21 and BART teams. First being that in a full service scenario, there is no capacity for additional trains in the existing Transbay Tube or in Market Street. So splitting that service would result both in a reduction of service to the existing Mission Street and beyond line, but also out Geary, preventing us from getting a full set of headways out there. Operationally, the merge and diverge in downtown San Francisco would introduce a point of unreliability as well. And finally, the impacts to construct that, not just the impacts on the surface, but the impacts on the operations of the existing BART and Muni Metro lines would be significant, including potentially a full shutdown to be able to break through that. So not on the table for us, not on the table for Link 21 as well. Second part of the question, thinking about the implications of Link 21's regional rail technology. This is one of the reasons why we have kept the full set of technologies on the table. There are real capacity questions about regional rail, particularly as it connects in the East Bay to privately owned Union Pacific Railroad with a limited number of slots. Capital Corridor has a series of plans underway to improve that capacity and maintain ownership of their own part of the railroad. But even then, that's a series of projects that are dependent on to deliver that capacity. In Western San Francisco, with a regional rail alignment, we don't have any service plans defined, but it is likely that the service that would come across a regional rail crossing would be split again between the existing Caltrain alignment and a Western San Francisco alignment. So understanding not just a capacity of being able to serve trains, but the capacity of being able to serve the demands that we see in Western San Francisco, keeping that frequency and capacity up.
Thanks, Andy. There are a few questions that have to do with alignment, but actually before I ask those, there's a question about benefits to the sunset, given that 19th Avenue, like the mid and outer sunset, which is a bit past, the alignment of 19th Avenue. So how would this project help the middle sunset and outer sunset?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple answers to that question. It sort of depends where you're going. So the project, particularly with regional integration down into San Mateo County, can help speed trips that today take a lot of time by transit with a bus transfer to rail to another bus transfer to directly serve that north-south pattern of travel that a lot of folks in our market analysis on the west side go to and from northern San Mateo County and western San Francisco in the sunset. Speaking to the point about how 19th Avenue, there are 20 some avenues west of there as well. We did take a look at lines like the L, the N, and the 7 who would intersect the subway on 19th Avenue. And it would actually be faster for someone further out in the avenues or towards the beach to take one of those lines, transfer to this line, be downtown in 10 minutes or less at that point. Which also helps make sort of two uses of capacity of those trains as they head in from the beach into downtown San Francisco.
So we have a question. I'll do a first cut at this one, which is, it's a good question. Has there been consideration of funding the project by issuing bonds backed by real estate along the corridor? This approach has been used successfully in other countries. Great question, and it is part of that very initial assessment of funding opportunities that Andy spoke to. And it's actually an approach that has been used successfully already in San Francisco, perhaps most notably with the Transbay Salesforce Transit Center and now the Portal project, where the Transit Center District Plan had a significant element of land use and an associated community facilities district, which directly generated funding to help support the delivery of that Transbay program. And those approaches there are many different flavors of that land value capture that can be considered and looked at, and they would be a focus as part of the funding strategy development in future phases of work. Andy, we got a few pretty specific questions about alignment, and there was one about whether we've considered having an extension further west along Geary as a spur, and then another question about might need to find it. That's the first one that we've gotten. I'll look for the other
Sure, yeah.
one.
I'll speak to that one as you look for the other one. So, for the purposes of this project, this is one of the sort of shifts in understanding that took place in our predecessor Connect SF in 2022 San Francisco Transportation Plan work. That a lot of the challenges of the Geary subways that have been considered before is that there's nowhere to service the trains. Demand begins to drop off as one gets closer to the ocean. And it's really difficult to operate in that environment. So we also considered the improvements to bus service on Geary. 38 and 38R have seen increased capacity and increased reliability. And we foresee those acting in concert in an eventual surface. So if you think about the Mission Street corridor today, there is a regionally connected subway underneath and a rapid and local bus that operates on the surface. So short trips are served, medium length trips are served, and as are trips that need to connect to the region. So this study did not include a consideration of a spur building on the decisions that had been made in the adopted plans of Connect SF, but did consider the transfer opportunities to the existing and potentially opportunities to modify. We didn't do any specifically, but I'd be remiss of saying a large investment like this may cause us to take a look at where buses go and where they intersect with the network to make sure those transfers are better and more seamless in the future.
I found the other question, which was about whether there has been consideration of a Sunset Boulevard alignment to go further west in terms of the north-south portion of the project.
Yeah, similar answer. Not in this study, but looking back to Connect SF effort, did consider alignments as far west as Sunset Boulevard. Part of the difficulty there is, particularly for a large investment like this, is that the closer you get to Ocean Beach, the more of the catchment areas of the station becomes the ocean rather than places where people live, work, go to school, and conduct business. So part of the reason why 19th Avenue was selected and recommended was that it allows the biggest opportunity for that approach I was discussing earlier, where folks that are further west can still take advantage of this opportunity without backtracking to catch the subway and benefit from the travel time and reliability improvements.
So we had a question about what lessons learned from the recent Central Subway project and that project's challenges have we applied to this project. I could start in this one, and if you want to jump in as well, Andy. Yeah, we're certainly focused on incorporating lessons learned from that project and other projects like Van Ness BRT and certainly the Portal project, which is advancing toward construction now. And one of the reasons to do this early strategic planning piece of work is to lay out a path forward through successive phases of planning and design that help us incorporate those best practices, incorporate better risk management, more realistic contingencies, and stronger oversight. I'll also just acknowledge that this is a very hot topic for professionals in the field and lots of our colleagues from across the region. Agencies, these projects are large, they are hard, and we've had mixed success. We've had some that have been very successful that have come in on budget across California, others that have encountered various challenges. And so there is a real growing focus regionally on how the region as a whole can learn from projects here as well as elsewhere in North America and across the globe to improve how we develop these projects and understand their cost. So we had a few questions about sorry, I'm trying to think of a way to synthesize this. So question again, another Link 21 question, Andy. If Link 21 were not to go forward, what would be the implications for this project, and could we somehow use the portal as a terminus.
I will let you speak to the portal part of that question, but I will speak from a planning and service implication. I think that a key part of that uncertainty is why we are leaving some of the San Francisco only options on the table here. Um, we understand that, based on this level of analysis, that regional connectivity brings a lot of benefits across the region, but it also is a whole nother project of this size or likely larger. I believe Link 21's estimates were in the $40 billion range. So I talked a little bit about phasing. It could impact some of that. So not precluding an eventual new Transbay crossing that, Link 21 might not be the method to get us there, as this question proposes. But if someone else picks it up in the future, we don't want to have boxed ourselves into a future where we couldn't take advantage of that in the future. So we would look to, what's the implications on the southern end of that as well? Is there still an opportunity to maintain through running technology at or around Daly City or Colma? Or do the benefits and the costs make a different picture when we get to that point of consideration? So that decision's still, a little bit of a ways off, but it's a good one to ask and to keep in mind, and the specific reason why we have some potential San Francisco only technology still on the table.
So we had a question picking back up on funding as to whether this study included any estimates of potential funding through specific value capture tools such as infrastructure financing districts, tax increment, Mello-Roos, and if we'd be able to fund the project in the event federal funding were not available. The question is fantastic. I love it. We did not in this study have the budget capacity to do detailed assessments of potential yield of those types of funding sources. That would be a key piece of work for the next phase of work. I don't know that I'll comment directly on the capacity of those sources to along with state money to fund us in the absence of federal money. I will say that historically in San Francisco, regionally and nationally, a strong role and a strong federal partner has typically been indispensable to deliver projects at this scale. And presently, the FTA's Capital Investment Grant Program is still moving forward with pretty significant funding in that pipeline. Andy, there was a through running clarification question about San Mateo County and whether that would require BART technology.
Yes, great question. Obviously, BART exists in San Mateo County already. So to through run onto that alignment, this project is certainly not proposing rebuilding, reconstructing, re-railing, re-gauging that alignment. So to do so would require the use of a BART technology, BART compatible technology in the Geary 19th subway. That said, to expand on that a little bit, I think we talked a little bit about the difficulty of doing some construction and integration in the area in downtown San Francisco in the financial district at our other end and using the existing BART tube. The existing Daly City BART station today is above ground, and the Colma station is not in a subway, but in a trench. So there are potentially more opportunities there if there were not through running technology to be able to create something that's more akin to what happens at MacArthur BART today, where trains pull up on opposite sides of the same platform together and can offer potentially a relatively seamless experience of a transfer versus up and down a lot of stairs or elevators or changing levels.
Okay, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're past the hour mark. I'm just doing a final scan on questions. If we missed one of your detailed questions, I apologize. Please reach out through our project email, and we will make sure to be in touch with you to answer it. I want to appreciate everyone for your time this evening, and maybe just ask my colleague Brittany if there is any other burning platform questions in the chat that I missed. I do have one here I do want to actually answer with everybody, which has to do with alignments and their impact on property and right-of-way, and whether we would be going under existing surface streets or if we would be acquiring private property. That the detailed analysis of that would come in future phases. What I will say is that projects such as this aim to have as much of their alignment as possible under public right-of-way to minimize that type of impact. In some cases, for station entrances or ventilation structures, or for a curve in the alignment, there is a necessity for some amount of private property to support the project that would be identified in the design and environmental review and be part of the pre-construction phase of the project to ensure that those parcels were available to the project. But we are many years away from the detailed conversations in that regard. So I think with that, we will wrap it up. If you're very keen to hear this again, please join us on Saturday morning. But more than that, if you know any of your friends, neighbors, family members, or other interested community members, please let them know about our workshop on the 7th. We'll look forward to that conversation on Saturday and to continue to work with many of you in future phases of this project. Thank you so much.